My name's Caleb Barney. I'm a realtor with Russell Real Estate. I work out of the Medina, Ohio office, but live in Strongsville, Ohio. And basically, what I wanted to talk about today was why it's a good time to buy real estate. So, if you've been in the market to buy a home recently, or if you've been paying attention to the news, you might actually be thinking the opposite. A lot of people say that it's a seller's market, and that's true for many areas of the country, and it's actually true in Northeast Ohio as well. But I think that it is still a great time to buy real estate right now, and I want to review the 7 reasons, or possibly even more, why you should buy or think about buying right now. So the first 4 reasons that almost any investor will tell you why they invest in real estate is going to be your loan paydown, cash flow, tax benefits, and then home appreciation. So starting with the first one, loan paydown. That is assuming that you're not paying for a property with all cash, first of all. But the reason why I like investing using loans is because you can utilize leverage. So there's a couple of different schools of thought. Obviously, if you are familiar with Dave Ramsey, he thinks that for the most part, he does use the exception for you buying your primary residence, but for an investment property, he believes that you should be paying cash for a rental property. For most people, that's just not feasible. Even at a low price of $100,000, most people don't have 100 grand to basically pay up front for a property. So I like to use leverage for any rental properties that I purchase. And basically what that means is I go to a lender, they say, hey, you need to put down 25%, show that you have some skin in the game, and then they will front the 75%, so the balance, provided that I am paying them interest on top of paying that 75% back to them. So basically, we're going to use easy numbers today. Say you're buying that $100,000 property. You can actually just buy it with $25,000 plus your closing costs then. And then you can have the bank lend you the $75,000 to pay to the seller. And once you have your tenant in place, you can have the tenant pay back that $75,000 plus the interest that you owe to the bank. So obviously, it's probably going to be multiple tenants. If you're owning it for the long term and you have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, chances are you're not going to have one tenant for 30 years. But if you pick the right tenants, basically, good tenants who aren't going to trash the place, they might stay there a little longer, they will actually be paying down your loan for you. And every payment that they make, a little bit of that gets applied toward the principal. So a little bit of that gets applied toward that $75,000 that you owe the bank. Of course, in the beginning, it's going to be much more heavily weighted towards paying the interest to the bank because they want to make sure that they're getting their money. But that is one nice way to build equity. Another reason why I like using leverage, by the way, is just because where else in the world can you say, hey, I want to pay $25,000 for a $100,000 asset. I invest in the stock market, so I like index funds, mutual funds, ETFs. Not a huge fan of individual stock picking, but I know it has its place for certain investors. But basically, if you go to buy a certain index fund with $25,000, you can get $25,000 worth of that asset. Whereas here, you can get a $100,000 asset for $25,000 and then have somebody else pay the rest of that loan off for you. So really cool that you can use the loan paydown to build equity for yourself. The second one is actually going to be cash flow. So that's the next reason why investors invest in real estate. So cash flow is not going to be a get-rich-quick scheme or anything like that. In fact, it's going to be pretty slow. Basically, what cash flow is, it's going to be your rental income that you're getting on a monthly basis minus your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, which is basically your mortgage payment, and then also taking into account vacancy, repairs and maintenance, capital expenditure, so big ticket items like a roof or a furnace. And then I like to include property management on that as well. The reason why I like to include property management or budget for it is because even though we do self-manage our properties right now, my wife and I, it's just way safer to at least plan to possibly pay somebody in the future for it. If not, that money's going back in our pocket, and that's okay with me too. So essentially, a lot of investors, they will want to aim for at least $100 per door or per unit, sometimes $200 per door or per unit. So realistically, you're not gaining a ton of equity every year, because say it's $100 of pure cash flow after everything's said and done per month, you're getting an extra $1,200 per year. It's nice. You could buy a nice Christmas gift. You could go out to eat with that money, whatever, or you can just reinvest, which I like to do. But basically, you are not getting rich quickly by doing that. Where I feel like a lot of investors do kind of overlook some things is they get stuck on the 1% rule, saying, hey, if I buy a property for $100,000, it should rent out for at least $1,000 per month, so 1% of the purchase price, and that means I should be cash flow positive. That is true. That is a rule of thumb, and with today's low interest rates, a lot of times you can buy at a 0.8% rental rule, meaning maybe you're renting it out for $800 a month for a $100,000 property and still make money, still be cash flow positive. Where inflation actually comes into play, and a lot of people they're familiar with the concept of inflation, but not necessarily, they don't understand how to apply it to other aspects of life, because a lot of people, they understand, okay, inflation means that the prices of all of our goods are going to go up. So right now, for 2021, the Consumer Price Index, which tracks or measures inflation, says that we are up 5% this year. So the Fed typically targets a 2% or 2 to 3% inflation rate, which is what they want. We're at 5%, so we're at about double of what they want. And basically what that means is if something costs you $1 today and you have 5% inflation rate year over year, that means it's going to cost $1.05 next year. So if you are holding money in the bank, which is typically viewed as safe, you're actually losing money. So $100,000 today with a 5% inflation rate really means you're going to have $95,000 worth of purchase power next year. So the more money you have, the more money you're losing. Obviously, it's just a percentage, but still something to keep in mind. Where inflation actually plays a positive role is through home ownership, and that's either going to be as your primary residence or as an investment property. Again, what this has to do with cash flow is when prices of goods increase, or when inflation goes up, the price of everything goes up, and that includes rental prices. So if you think your $1,000 a month for rent is expensive right now, imagine in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, do you think that you're still going to be able to rent out the same apartment or the same house for the same price? And the answer is no, just because of inflation. So the thing that does not go up is going to be your fixed rate mortgage. So that's why it really makes sense to lock in a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, because it's basically a one-way street. Because we are basically at or near all-time lows for interest rates. If the interest rates happen to go even lower, and it's financially beneficial for you to refinance, you can refinance. You can go to the bank and say, hey, I want to take advantage of the newer, lower interest rate. But when interest rates go up, which they are projected to do, the bank can't come to you and say, hey, we just raised the rates for everybody. We're going to, instead of charging you, say 4% or 4.5%, because investment loans are more expensive than primary residences, we're going to bump yours up to 5 or 6%. They can't do that. It's a one-way street. So you can take advantage of it, but they can't raise your rates. Meanwhile, you can increase the rent rates to basically match the cost of living. So that's cash flow. Again, get rich slow for that one. The tax benefits, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on, just because I'm not a CPA, so I definitely recommend that you go to a CPA who is well-versed in real estate and understands the guidelines for this, but they can save you a ton of money. But then B, I don't even fully understand it myself. So from what I do understand, basically you can deduct your mortgage interest, your property taxes, your operating expenses, and the depreciation of the value of your home, which is basically paper loss. And you could basically deduct all of that from your tax returns. So that's where the uber rich, people, the people like Donald Trump, where they used to brag. He doesn't. I don't think he wants to disclose how much he is or is not paying in taxes anymore. But they used to brag about how much or how little they paid in taxes, if any. And that's because they had a plethora of tax benefits from owning a lot of real estate. So again, talk to a CPA if if you want to know more about that. And then lastly, the fourth main reason why almost any investor will tell you why it's smart to buy real estate or invest in real estate is home appreciation. So for that, basically they are just saying that, and again, this goes back to inflation, but home values increase over time. So there's no guarantee that the home that you buy today is going to be worth more tomorrow or next year or the year after that. But if you're holding real estate for a long enough time horizon, so if you're holding real estate for 20 years or 30 years, almost guaranteed, that property is going to be worth more in 30 years than it is today. And the example I always use for that, or I like to think of for that, is my parents. They actually bought a house in 1989 for under $100,000, and I have not run a CMA to establish the true market value for it, but it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $275,000. So again, using round easy numbers, let's say they bought it for 90, it's worth 270 now. That is tripling the home value over the course of them owning that home. So that's them owning it as a primary residence, where they actually, it doesn't benefit them as much because they paid the entire principal and interest on it. Whereas, again, if you're using it or buying an investment property and you only put down $25,000 on a $100,000 property, the tenant is paying, or tenants are paying down the rest of the loan and interest for you. And then the home appreciates in value, mostly due to inflation, honestly, because it's going to be a similar home, similar land value, everything like that. But just because the cost of living and basically the cost of everything has gone up, you could triple your investment there, and more so just because you're only putting in $25,000 and now it's worth close to $300,000. So that's the really cool part. I always say that's the icing on the cake, because you can't necessarily bank on appreciation. You don't know how much the home is going to appreciate, and you don't necessarily know how long you're planning on holding it. You could say that you're planning on holding it forever, but who knows if you actually will or not. So that's the icing on the cake. You don't want to speculate too much. That's where people got in trouble in 2008, where they were essentially flipping homes because the home values were increasing so drastically year over year, and then one day it just bottomed out. So you don't want to bank on it, but that is the greatest wealth generator for the average everyday American, and that's why I think everybody should focus on at least buying their primary residence, because ultimately, you have to pay to live somewhere. whether you're just paying rent at an apartment, which I've done, there's a time and a place for that. I think the ultimate goal should be to own your own home though. One, because at the end of the 30 years, as long as you haven't refinanced or done anything crazy, maybe you took out a HELOC or something, but at the end of the 30 years, you own that free and clear. So you don't owe principal and interest anymore. Yes, you still have to pay your property taxes. Yes, you still have to, well, you don't have to, but yes, it's recommended you keep insurance on your property. But that's essentially cutting your living expense. That's your biggest expense. So once you get to retirement age, it's going to be easy living for you. And then two, if you did want to downsize or if you wanted to liquidate some of those funds, you can sell it and you made $200,000 in net profit there, or whatever the case may be. And that's why it's important to buy properties for your primary residence. But imagine if you could scale that and you bought 5 properties and they all went up $200,000 in value, or 10 properties and they all went up $200,000 in value. Like, you could see how easy it is to scale that up then. And again, that's where basically having the government subsidize a lot of our spending on homes, because they're incentivizing us to buy and helping us, where they say, hey, you could buy a home with, if it's primary residence, 3.5% down. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. Lastly, I know that I'm talking for quite a while. Those are the 4 main reasons. The 3 other reasons why I like to invest in real estate. One, it's tangible. Again, I do invest in the stock market, myself and my family, but ultimately, to me, those are just numbers on a screen. So I could see what my index fund is doing, but I'm just tracking numbers on a screen and it doesn't seem tangible to me. Whereas I can drive by a home, I can touch it, feel it, do whatever I want. I can step on the property, it's tangible. 2 is I actually have a direct influence over my investment then. So if I buy, I was just using the example earlier, paying $25,000 for a property that's valued at $100,000. But what if you bought a property under the appraised value? What if you were able to get a deal and you bought a property for $80,000 and it appraised at $100,000? You instantly have $20,000 of equity right there. What if you bought a small fixer-upper? Maybe it had old carpet, ugly paint, just needed minor touches, new light fixtures, new plumbing fixtures, stuff that you can mostly do yourself, and you were able to renovate it and force appreciation and increase the value that way. You can choose the right tenant. You can choose your rental rate. You have direct influence over how well your investment does, as opposed to investing, especially in individual stocks, which again, I don't invest in individual stocks anymore. But, if you put your money in your faith in the wrong company, who's to say that they're not cooking the books, that they're about to go bankrupt, that they, the CEO doesn't make a terrible decision or get canceled or get fired or whatever. You don't know the decisions that they're making, and you don't have a say in what they are doing. So that's why I like that. And then lastly is you can use it. So again, this works for both primary residence and investment properties. Primary residence, obviously it makes sense. Yeah, you're using it every day. You're playing with the kids in the basement, you're going out in the backyard, whatever the case may be. But for the investment property, maybe you're not doing it for a long-term rental, but maybe for a short-term or vacation rental. You can actually use that property. You can go there when it's not being rented out, and you can enjoy your time away somewhere else, and you're not paying for a hotel or you're not paying for an Airbnb, because you are the Airbnb. So that's why I like real estate. That's why I think it makes sense to invest in real estate, even in today's market. And if you have any questions, Any comments, feedback for me, what I can improve, let me know. I would be more than happy to talk with anybody about anything. And if you did like this video, please like it and share with a friend who you think might benefit from this. Again, this is Caleb Barney with Russell Real Estate, and have a great day.